Landman, Season 2, Episode 6, feels dangerous in a way the show hasn't felt before. Because for the first time, Tommy Norris isn't the smartest man in the room anymore, and Galliano knows it. Every conversation carries hidden intent, every decision feels like a trap, and by the end of this episode, it becomes painfully clear that the takeover has already started. Not with violence, not with threats, but with trust. Slowly, carefully, and deliberately stolen away. Episode 6 opens with a tension that doesn't need explosions or arguments to be felt. It's quiet, uncomfortable, and that's exactly what makes it so effective. Tommy walks into this episode already wounded, but not broken. At least, not yet. The real problem is that everyone else is starting to see him differently. Where he used to be the final authority, the steady voice of reason, he's now becoming an obstacle. And Galliano is positioning himself as the solution to everything Tommy warns against. What makes this episode so good is how subtle the shift is. There's no single moment where Cammy officially turns her back on Tommy. Instead, it happens in fragments. A look held a second too long. A suggestion she doesn't immediately shut down. A meeting where Tommy speaks and no one rushes to back him up. You can feel his influence slipping, and the scariest part is that he knows it too. Tommy has always been able to control chaos by understanding the rules better than anyone else. But Galliano doesn't play by the rules. He reshapes them. Galliano continues doing what he does best, presenting himself as calm, reasonable, and inevitable. He doesn't raise his voice. He doesn't argue aggressively. He simply keeps reminding Cammy that survival sometimes requires uncomfortable choices. And the more pressure Cammy feels from regulators, deadlines, and financial threats, the more Galliano's presence starts to feel less like a danger and more like a necessity. That's the genius of his strategy. He doesn't convince her Tommy is wrong. He convinces her that Tommy is no longer enough. Tommy, on the other hand, spends most of this section reacting instead of leading, which is something we rarely see from him. He's still trying to protect the company, still trying to keep Cammy out of irreversible mistakes, but his warnings are starting to sound repetitive. And in a crisis, repetition looks like fear. Every time he brings up consequences, Galliano counters with solutions. Every time Tommy talks about risk, Galliano talks about control. And slowly, the balance shifts. What really hurts to watch is that Tommy isn't acting out of ego. He's acting out of experience. He has seen what happens when money comes from the wrong place. He has lived through deals that looked clean on paper and ended in blood. But Episode 6 makes it painfully clear that experience doesn't always win against desperation. Cammy isn't ignoring Tommy because she thinks he's wrong. She's ignoring him because she's exhausted, cornered, and tired of being told what she can't do. By the end of this first stretch of the episode, the message is unmistakable. Galliano doesn't need to defeat Tommy outright. He just needs to replace him emotionally. And once Cammy starts trusting Galliano's calm over Tommy's caution, the war is already lost, even if no one has admitted it yet. If the first part of Episode 6 shows the power shifting, the second part shows how carefully that shift is being engineered. Galliano doesn't rush anything. In fact, the more pressure everyone else feels, the calmer he becomes. And that contrast is exactly what makes him so dangerous. While Tommy is trying to hold together a company that feels like it's slipping through his fingers, Galliano is planting ideas. Not commands, not demands, just ideas that linger long after the conversation ends. What's terrifying here is how Galliano never directly attacks Tommy. He doesn't call him incompetent or outdated. Instead, he frames everything as concern. He talks about stress, about how much pressure Cammy is under, about how maybe Tommy has been carrying too much responsibility for too long. And in doing so, he slowly reframes Tommy from trusted right-hand man to problem that needs managing. This is manipulation at its cleanest, and Episode 6 makes sure we feel every inch of it. Tommy senses it happening, but for the first time, he doesn't know how to stop it. His usual tactic, brutal honesty, starts backfiring. Every time he speaks plainly about consequences, it sounds like negativity. Every warning feels like resistance to progress. And Galliano is always there to soften the blow, to say what Tommy won't say in a way people want to hear. The result is devastating. Tommy begins to look emotional, while Galliano looks strategic. There's a particularly heavy moment where Tommy realizes he's no longer being consulted. He's being informed. Decisions are already made before he walks into the room. That's the moment when control truly slips away. Not with a firing, not with an argument, but with silence. And for someone like Tommy, silence is worse than confrontation. It means he's already lost influence. Cammy's behavior in this section is complicated, and that's what makes it realistic. She isn't cold, she isn't cruel, she's focused. Every second she spends doubting herself feels like a luxury she can't afford, and Galliano understands that perfectly. He positions himself as the man who can make decisions without emotional weight, while Tommy carries too much history, too much fear, too many ghosts from past disasters. Meanwhile, Tommy starts making small mistakes. Nothing catastrophic, but noticeable. He interrupts when he shouldn't. He pushes when patience is needed. These aren't signs of incompetence, they're signs of desperation. And Galliano uses each slip as quiet evidence that Tommy is no longer steady. It's painful to watch because we know Tommy is right about the dangers ahead, but being right doesn't matter if no one is listening. By the end of this section, the emotional gap between Tommy and Cammy has widened into something neither of them knows how to cross anymore. Galliano hasn't taken over the company yet, but he has taken over the narrative. And once he controls the story everyone believes, the outcome becomes almost inevitable. While the power struggle between Tommy and Galliano continues to tighten, Episode 6 shifts its focus to Cooper. And what we get here is less about oil and money and more about maturity colliding with reality. Cooper entered this season believing confidence alone could carry him through anything. Episode 6 quietly dismantles that illusion. There's no dramatic failure, no public humiliation, just a slow realization that being an adult means consequences don't wait for you to be ready. Cooper is now standing at the edge of two massive commitments at once: marriage and responsibility. And the episode does a great job showing how unprepared he actually is without making him look foolish. His conversations feel heavier. His confidence sounds rehearsed rather than earned. Every time someone mentions the future, you can feel him mentally calculating what he might be losing rather than what he's building. That hesitation says more than any outburst ever could. Tommy, despite everything going wrong in his own life, remains the only person willing to tell Cooper the uncomfortable truth. He doesn't discourage love, he discourages recklessness. And there's a big difference. He warns Cooper that responsibility doesn't arrive in stages. It arrives all at once. A job, a marriage, a child in his life, none of these things pause while you figure yourself out. They demand consistency, patience, and sacrifice. Things Cooper has never truly been tested on before. What makes this storyline work so well is how the show refuses to rush Cooper's growth. He doesn't suddenly become wise. He doesn't magically mature. Instead, we see fear creeping in. Fear of failing Ariana, fear of becoming someone he can't live up to, fear of repeating mistakes he doesn't even fully understand yet. And that fear is necessary. It's the first sign that he's actually starting to grow. Ariana, on the other hand, feels grounded in a way Cooper isn't. She knows what she wants, and she doesn't hesitate to move toward it. That imbalance is important. It forces Cooper to confront the reality that love alone won't carry him through what's coming. He has to change. And Episode 6 makes it clear that change doesn't come gently. By the end of this section, Cooper isn't broken, but he's shaken. The excitement that once drove him has been replaced by something quieter and more serious. And just like his father, he's beginning to understand that in this world, confidence without preparation is just another form of risk. Episode 6 reaches one of its most uncomfortable stretches when everyone is placed together in the same space, pretending that nothing has changed. The rodeo isn't about celebration or tradition, it's about optics. And Tommy feels that immediately. What should have been a casual outing turns into a silent demonstration of where power now sits. Cammy and Galliano move as a unit, while Tommy trails behind, present but no longer essential. This is where the episode becomes almost painful to watch. Tommy isn't arguing anymore. He isn't warning anyone, he's observing. And what he sees confirms his worst fear. Galliano has fully embedded himself into Cammy's world. Their conversations are easy, their body language is relaxed, decisions are discussed openly in front of him, but not with him. He's not excluded, he's sidelined. And that distinction matters. Galliano continues playing both sides with frightening precision. With Cammy, he reinforces the idea that Tommy is resistant to change, too tied to the past to see the future clearly. With Tommy, he does something even more cruel. He speaks honestly, or at least convincingly so. He tells Tommy that Cammy is preparing to move forward without him, that his role is temporary, that loyalty doesn't survive financial pressure. Whether this is true or not almost doesn't matter. The damage comes from planting the thought. Tommy's reaction isn't explosive. It's internal. You can see him mentally running through every possible outcome, every move he could make, and realizing none of them end cleanly. If he pushes back, he proves Galliano right. If he stays quiet, he fades further into irrelevance. It's a trap designed to break him slowly, not loudly. Cammy, meanwhile, seems unaware of how deep the manipulation runs. Or maybe she's choosing not to see it. From her perspective, Galliano brings clarity while Tommy brings hesitation. And in a crisis, clarity feels like leadership. That's the tragedy of this moment. Tommy's loyalty is unquestioned, but loyalty doesn't pay debts or stop investigations. Galliano understands that, and he uses it mercilessly. By the end of the rodeo, the emotional truth is unavoidable. Tommy has lost his place beside Cammy. Not officially, not yet, but emotionally, the bond is fractured beyond repair. And once trust is gone, no amount of history can replace it. Episode 6 makes it clear that Tommy isn't being pushed out. He's being erased. By the time Episode 6 reaches its final moments, the tension isn't explosive. It's suffocating. This is no longer about whether Tommy and Galliano can coexist. That question has already been answered. The real question now is how long Tommy can survive in a system that no longer wants him. And the answer, painfully, feels like not much longer. Tommy ends this episode more isolated than we've ever seen him. Not because he lacks allies, but because the structure he helped build no longer has a place for his voice. Every instinct he has is telling him something is deeply wrong. But instincts mean nothing when the people in charge stop trusting them. He's not just losing his job, he's losing his identity. For a man who defined himself by being useful, by being necessary, that loss cuts deeper than any betrayal. Galliano, meanwhile, stands exactly where he planned to be. Not as a villain twirling his mustache, but as a man who appears reasonable, composed, and indispensable. That's what makes him terrifying. He doesn't force his way into power. He allows others to hand it to him willingly. By the end of the episode, it's clear that even if Galliano never signs a single document, he already controls the direction of the company and the people inside it. By the final stretch of Episode 6, everything feels locked into place. And that's what makes it so unsettling. There is no chaos yet, no public disaster, no sudden collapse. Instead, there is certainty. The kind of certainty that tells you the damage has already been done, and what's coming next is unavoidable. Tommy isn't fighting Galliano anymore. He's fighting time, and time is not on his side. What hurts the most is that Tommy finally understands something he refused to accept earlier. This isn't about logic or facts anymore. It's about influence. Galliano has successfully positioned himself as the future, while Tommy represents the past. Not because Tommy is wrong, but because he reminds people of consequences they don't want to face. And in Episode 6, we watch that realization drain the last bit of control from him. His warnings are still correct, but they no longer carry weight. Galliano's confidence becomes almost unsettling here. He speaks like someone who already knows the outcome. Not arrogant, not reckless, just certain. He doesn't need to rush Cammy or pressure her publicly. He lets the environment do the work for him. Regulators, deadlines, financial threats, all of it slowly pushes Cammy toward decisions that benefit Galliano the most. And every step she takes away from Tommy feels justified in the moment. Cammy's transformation in this episode is subtle, but powerful. She becomes colder, more decisive, less willing to explain herself. Not because she's heartless, but because vulnerability now feels dangerous. She believes leadership requires emotional distance. And tragically, the person she distances herself from first is the one who has always protected her from making irreversible mistakes. Meanwhile, Cooper's storyline quietly mirrors Tommy's in a different way. Both men are learning that good intentions don't prevent consequences. Cooper is stepping into adulthood without a safety net, while Tommy is watching his legacy slip away piece by piece. One is gaining responsibility. the other is losing authority. And both journeys are filled with doubt, fear, and pressure that doesn't care how ready they feel. The episode ends with a heavy sense of dread rather than shock. You don't leave excited, you leave worried. Worried about what Galliano will do once he no longer needs Tommy. Worried about how far Cammy will go to keep the company alive. Worried about whether Cooper can survive the life he's rushing into. Episode 6 doesn't scream danger, it whispers it. And those whispers are far more terrifying. This is the moment before everything breaks. The calm before the storm that no one can stop anymore. Tommy's worst fear isn't just coming true, it's already here. If episode 6 proves anything, it's that control can disappear long before anyone admits it's gone. By this point, Tommy isn't just reacting to Galliano. He's trapped inside a system that no longer rewards caution or loyalty. Every option in front of him carries a cost, and the worst part is that doing nothing might be the most expensive choice of all. The episode makes it painfully clear that Tommy is now operating in enemy territory, even though no one has officially declared war. What's especially chilling is how normal everything looks on the surface. Meetings still happen, deals still move forward, smiles are still exchanged. But beneath that calm exterior, the foundation is cracking. Galliano has positioned himself so perfectly that even his silence feels powerful. When he doesn't speak, others fill in the gaps for him. When he does speak, his words feel final. That's not influence, that's authority. And Tommy can feel it settling into place. Tommy starts realizing that the rules he lived by no longer apply. Honesty no longer earns trust. Experience no longer commands respect. And loyalty no longer guarantees a seat at the table. The system has evolved, and it evolved without him. This isn't just a professional loss, it's existential. He spent his life mastering this world, only to discover that the world has changed faster than he could adapt. Cammy, meanwhile, is fully committed to forward motion. She doesn't look back anymore. Every hesitation feels like weakness, and every emotional connection feels like a liability. She believes she's becoming stronger, and in many ways, she is. But strength without balance quickly turns into isolation. Episode 6 quietly suggests that by the time Cammy realizes what Galliano truly is, she may no longer have the power to remove him. And that's what makes this episode linger long after it ends. There's no dramatic cliffhanger because the real danger isn't sudden, it's structural. The wrong people are gaining influence. The right warnings are being ignored. And the man who understands the consequences better than anyone else is slowly being pushed out of the picture, further from Tommy's control, and every move he makes seems to backfire. Episode 6 doesn't just show a battle for power. It exposes the cracks in loyalty, trust, and ambition, and by the end, nothing will feel the same. You think you know who's in charge, but after this episode, even the strongest alliances will shatter, and every decision comes with a cost that could ruin everyone involved. This isn't just a Landman episode, it's a masterclass in manipulation, suspense, and betrayal. Right from the start, episode 6 throws Tommy into a storm of chaos that he can't avoid. The tension is palpable as he tries to maintain control, but Galliano is already 3 steps ahead, quietly maneuvering his influence over Cammy, while sowing seeds of doubt about Tommy's loyalty and judgment. What makes this episode truly intense is how the power dynamics shift almost imperceptibly at first. Cammy, still reeling from the events of episode 5, is determined to prove she can make the decisions on her own, but her trust in Tommy is quietly eroding. Every conversation,